The committee is resumed after the lunch break. The question before the committee is that the new Part 5, in the name of the Honourable Shane Jones, is to stand part. And at the dinner break, Harawira was speaking, and he has 2 minutes and 4 seconds remaining, should he wish to take it. Point of order, the Honourable David Parker.
Interrupting his debate, and thought I should make this point of order at the start of this session, sir. We are considering new parts to this bill, and I would express a concern that the time being allowed to consider these parts is obviously a lot less than was allocated to earlier parts in the bill which were brought forward by the government. I would make the point that it's the opposition's right to bring forward parts and have them properly debated. It is, of course, proper of the chair to cut off debate where no new points are being raised on debating points in committee, where there is undue repetition, and that, of course, is within your rights. But I would suggest, sir, that we're verging in respect of some of the short closures that we had earlier in the morning on doing that before all points have been exhaustively covered by speakers. And I know that there's a tension here between the government getting this business through and the opposition delaying it, but as I would suggest, sir, that it is the right of the opposition to acting as we are. It is an important check against the powers of the government, particularly in urgency, that the opposition be able to exercise their rights to the limits of standing orders, and I ask the chair to consider that in rulings this afternoon.
I call the Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker, that's an interesting point of order put to you by the Honourable David Parker, but it does directly challenge your authority in the chair. And I would simply remind the House that it was the Honourable David Parker who this morning told anybody who was here to listen, or anybody who was listening in, that the Labour Party are in fact engaging in a filibuster on this bill. Now, I would have thought that is a clear indication to everybody that most of the matters that are being dealt with at the moment are not serious, and that they are simply vexatious and frivolous, being forwarded by the Labour Party to try and prolong the debate today. The other thing is that if it were debate that we were engaged in this whole bill, that might be interesting, but the vast majority of the time spent on this bill has been simply spent dealing with, through the vote process, the extensive range of frivolous amendments put up by the Labour Party. I think now some 8,000 amendments dealt with one way or another. Mr Speaker, the real point, though, is we do think that continued challenges to the chair are completely unacceptable and should not continue to be a feature of this debate.
Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Chairman, I think it's important at this juncture that the House consider very carefully, under your guidance, the way forward. In the first place, I'd submit to you, sir, that the point of order brought by my colleague David Parker in no way trifled with your rulings. It sought a clarification from you, and it asked at your discretion, sir, that you take into account various factors going forward, and I would like to echo the strongly expressed sentiments of my colleague David Parker in this respect. Second point, sir, is that the Leader of the House has, in his submission, failed to distinguish between amendments and parts. The submission of David Parker was specifically related to parts, not clause amendments, and asked that parts be fully debated. As is well known to you and to the Leader of the House, amendments to clauses... Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, the Honourable David Cunliffe. I know what the point of order is going to be, and could I ask the Leader of the House to let the member make his point of order? If I feel he's getting off the point, I will stop his point of order.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. The example was given by the Leader of the House about so-called trivial changes to dates and so forth. Those are clearly distinct from the movement of entire new parts. The application of the word trivial to a part such as Part 5, which the House is currently debating, sir, I submit to you as a gross insult to the affected communities, Maori, Pacific and other ethnic groups. It is simply not appropriate, sir, that members of this House should describe mechanisms to ensure appropriate representation of that nature as trivial. That brings us to I guess the core point of the Leader of the House's submission, sir, which was that these parts, in his view, are no more than a quote, filibuster, and therefore do not deserve the protection of standing orders. and sir, that brings into question whether the member's perception of the part should stand for the whole House. Clearly it should not, sir, and that this Part 5 is an example of an extremely substantive and well thought out part. Why is it necessary, sir? That is the whole point.
Order.
Because there is inadequate protection in the main bill.
Order. The member's straying into the substance of the vote. Let me make a number of points. Firstly, it's not helpful to have descriptors of what members do as trivial or this or that or the other. This is a point of order, is about order. It's not about the emotional words that one might wish to attach to it. Secondly, I'd make the point again that no matter what members write on their amendments, parts, multi-parts, they are still amendments. So these are amendments according to the standing orders which we are considering. They are not parts. Because they are amendments of such nature, they will get a little more airtime than would they were a one-word amendment. So that's reflected in the Chair's consideration. I repeat for the House the 2 points that I made before. It's the 2 R's here. Relevancy and repetition will guide the Chair's decisions. Relevancy, repetition. The third point I'd make, and make again, and this will never change as long as we have this Parliament. The decision will be the Chair's and the Chair's alone. No correspondence will be entered into, no emails, no texts, no groans, no sighs, no rolling the head, eyes in the back of your head. Will all be wash over the Chair's opinion as impartially the Chair will determine the appropriate time for the House to consider the amendment. Could I then also make the other point, which I think is important and I think is fundamental here. New Zealand is a democracy. We argue, we battle over words. This is a contest of words. And this is a contest of wills. And it seems to me, in a way, it's a little bit like Ogden Nash. When the going gets tough, the tough go shopping. He didn't say that. But in this situation, when the going gets tough on the House, when the tough gets going, the tough write amendments or write parts. And this is what this is about. This is a wrestle. But at the end of the day, we have to have the debate. It has to be relevant, it has to be cogent, it has to be the point, and repetition isn't entered into. Either side are going to feel aggrieved and disappointed at some point. That's the role of the Chair. But we will make these decisions as we go, piece by piece. I state it again, Chair's decision, no correspondence entered into, relevancy, repetition. Now, I was up to Harawira, and the member has 2 minutes and 4 seconds left to speak.
Tēnā koe. Kia ora tātou katoa. Mr. Speaker, if Labour's proposal for Pacific and Asian seats was genuinely about representation, then where are the seats for the Somali, the Kenyan, the Dalmatian or the South African? Although I respect much of what Labour has had to say today, this proposal is nothing but a naked grab for the votes of the large Pacific and Asian populations in Auckland. And while I have the greatest of respect for my Pacific cousins, and I note the fact that the phrase sons of Maui, attributed to George Hawkins, was actually one coined first by myself in this House in recognition of our historical relationship to one another. And while I respect the right of Asians to be heard, I can never accept the betrayal by Labour's Maori MPs of the primary right of Maori to be on the Auckland Council as mana whenua, as tangata whenua, and as Maori. I am outraged by the cringing position taken by those Labour Maori MPs in allowing the status of Maori to be downgraded to that of other ethnic groups. For we are, and always will be, the first people of this great land of Aotearoa. And I call on those Labour Maori MPs to speak up for Maori, to fight for Maori, and to be Maori. To fight for those seats on the Auckland Council, for mana whenua first, for Maori second, and for anybody else after that. Or to admit their failings, to recognise their duplicity, to confess their complicity, and to resign their seats forthwith. Their mana, for what it's worth, the mana of their people, and indeed the mana of their tupuna, deserves nothing less. Kia ora tātou.